Welcome to another episode of Brave Namibia, where we celebrate both the ordinary and extraordinary Namibians. In today's episode, Jana-Mari Smith interviews human rights attorney and advocate Melanie Nathan. She is the executive director of the African Human Rights Coalition. She delves deeper into the significance of the fight between the Ministry of Home Affairs and Namibian Phillip Lühl, whose fight for citizenship for his surrogacy-born son continues.
This was the day High Court Judge Thomas Masuku granted citizenship by descent to 2-year-old Jona after a lengthy battle in the courts by his parents Namibian Phillip Lühl and Guillermo Delgado. Jona was born via surrogacy in South Africa in 2019 and was joined this year by his twin sisters, also born via surrogacy. But while a High Court judge has now decreed that the children are Namibians by descent, the Ministry of Home Affairs are appealing this decision at the Supreme Court. Today we talk to the Executive Director of the African Human Rights Coalition, Melanie Nathan. Melanie is a human rights attorney and equality advocate born and raised in South Africa. What do you think of Judge Masuku's judgment?
I did think it was a groundbreaking judgment. I thought it was a bold judgment. I was really pleased to see that it was progressive in nature. It stands globally as a progressive instrument. And what I saw that I found really interesting about it was that his willingness to interpret the Constitution widely and not narrowly. And I saw that as being very good for Namibia in general, because, you know, the courts have trends and the court is independent. It's an independent from the government judicial body. So when you see something like that happens, it gives you confidence in the independence of the court. The judge did make a distinction about the issue of Namibia being a secular country. And in a good constitution, what you do is you separate church and state. And if you were to look at all the very anti-LGBTQI stuff that goes on in the world, it's very religious-based. And so what those kind of religious beliefs and ideals do is that they rob people of their separate beliefs, and they rob people of their right to a civil law that should exclude religion and not be based on religion. And so much of what we see that is anti-LGBTQI is religious-based. And so if you're going to allow that to happen, then you're not genuinely separating church and state in your country. The other aspect of it is, it seemed to me that the judge was really considering the best interests of this child. And that's what you're supposed to do. The interests of the child is of paramount importance. And if it's already established that this child has two parents, how can you say anything that in any way, shape, or form might mitigate that? There's absolutely no way that should be mitigated. So I like that the judge, he referenced progress, and he referenced the world, the new world, the way it is. And he also referenced that we shouldn't look at a constitution in a tight, myopic way.
What do you make of the appeal?
What I see with that is a government that is desperately trying to find a way to avert this progress. I don't think what they realize they're doing is that they're fighting against decolonization. Because if we look at how these laws that turn out to be anti-gay come about, especially the sodomy laws, even though this is not about that, but this is all in context of denying LGBTQI people their right to love, their right to equality, their right to their happiness, their right to sit on a stoop with their cup of coffee with their mate of their choice when they're 95. Do you know what I mean? It's like, if this is something that requires decolonization, the laws that stopped all that, because why? Because Africa never had these laws until the English and the Germans and the Belgians and the Portuguese, and they all came from Europe, and they said, we don't like that behavior, we're going to make these laws. And so now those countries have equality, but Africa's stuck with these old penal codes and the stuff that demonize and criminalize our relationships in effect. And this case stands as a testament to that. So if you look at the actual argument and each of the, I'm thinking now where there are 12 points that the that the government has made, it's nitpicking to find, it's desperately seeking to thwart the progress, which in effect is a refusal to decolonize. What I find so tragic about what the Namibian government is doing here is it's almost like it's the last stand, that they're holding on to this because of the fear that there could be marriage equality, or, but what they're doing that I think is so important is they really are attacking surrogacy, and they're attacking adoption. Because if you start to look into that, what you realize is the minute, if how they want this law to be created through this appeal, they are putting all surrogacy and all adoption for all Namibians, whether straight or gay, in danger. So their very judgment on this whole issue is risking a huge backfiring. And it's so amazing to me that somebody hasn't sat down and analyzed this properly, or that they are willing and so desperately homophobic that they will go to those lengths to risk that for everybody. I just find that absolutely fascinating, because honestly, they shouldn't have touched this with a 10-foot barge pole. They should have just stepped back. In my opinion, had this been a straight couple, this wouldn't even be on the table. And therein, that is the key. Therein lies the discrimination, because what the Namibian government in effect is doing ultimately with their entire nitpicky argument is saying, we don't recognize the dads. We don't recognize that you can have two dads.
The appeal, is that pro-child?
The appeal tries to pretend to be pro-child. But let me tell you where it makes its mistake. It basically says that its way of thinking is in the best interest of the child. But that's not the case, because its way of thinking is robbing the child of its two parents, in effect. And it's, let's take the situation of the two dads, right? So the government is effectively saying, well, if we interpret Namibian law this way, and we get rid of this judgment, there's this other father. Why can't they get? They're not stateless. The baby's not stateless because the baby can get the citizenship of the other father, right? That argument is so absurd. The baby is stateless if you say that Namibia can't be the descendant citizen country. Because what if Mexico says the same thing? And it's just an example of how it's grasping at straws. And the government is certainly totally turning its back on this baby. And that's absolutely abhorrent and tragic. And what it's doing is it's using its anti-homosexuality stance to really persecute a child, because what we're talking about here is the child's rights.
How does Namibia compare to the region in terms of LGBTQ rights?
When we look at Namibia, we look at that whole southern region. But before we look at that, what I'd like to comment on first is north of that. North of that, you have the East Africa region, West Africa, Northwest Africa region, and those countries criminalize LGBTQI people, and those countries average an 85 to 95% anti-homosexuality stance. You have Uganda, for example, in 2014, passing the now defunct, what was known as the Kill the Gays Bill, the Anti-Homosexuality Act. You have hundreds of LGBT people right now in forced displacement, having to leave their own countries because they've been beaten, they've been raped, they've been demonized, they've had all these horrible things happen because of the criminalizing laws. And this has also been because of a big religious stance against LGBTQ people. Though there are 33 countries right now on the continent that criminalize LGBTQI people. And some of the countries that don't criminalize still persecute anyway. So north of where you are in Namibia, there's all that going on, and it's pretty rough. Now you come south, and you have South Africa getting its new constitution just over 20 years ago. And you have Namibia's independence from South Africa. And if you look at the preamble in the Namibian constitution, what does it say? It says, now we're out of racism, now we're out of apartheid, right? Now, bear in mind, that's what's in your Namibian constitution. So now, when we look at the Namibian constitution, we have that preamble that says we are now out of apartheid. We base this constitution on no racism, no apartheid. Then we look at South Africa. When South Africa got its new constitution, what did Madiba, former President Nelson Mandela, say? He said, never again will we allow South Africa to be the skunk of the world. And then he put in full equality for LGBTQI people based on that statement. And now Namibia has the opportunity to follow that path. If Namibia is truly saying in its constitution that it no longer wants apartheid, then don't be a skunk against LGBTQI people. Do what South Africa did. Include it in your constitution. Go that far. Not everyone's going to like it, but that is what is right. That is what is anti-discrimination, and that is what a constitution should be. Now, what you have is the influence of other countries around you, Botswana, Angola, I think Mozambique a while back. So they are decriminalizing. That's a start. That's a good start, but it's not enough. It's not enough. You have got to decolonize. You have got to step fully out of apartheid and what it served to do. And you have got to take the reins, and you have got to do it in a way that doesn't demonize the people, any people. So here's the thing that I see. The problem is, for us in the West, for us in America, Canada, Australia, to say to you in Africa, you are homophobic, you must change your laws, is not entirely the right way to go about this. It must come from within. It must embrace the principles of Ubuntu, humanity. It must look at itself from within and not be pressured from us, from the outside. And the only way you can do that is if you start to not point fingers at people and say, you're bad for being a homophobe, but rather say, let me explain to you the history of what happened. What happened was we were colonized, and now it's time to decolonize. And we say, this is who I am. I am your son, I'm your daughter, I'm your niece, I'm your nephew, and I need you to love me the way I am. So there's all these different ways that one can tackle this.
Well, thank you so much. I think that brings us to the end of this conversation, but I think there will be many more opportunities for you to share your expertise with us going forward, some interesting judgments coming up. Thank you so, so much for making the time and sharing your views. Thank you.
I want to thank you very much. And as a parting word, I would like to say to all Namibians that if this judgment can stand in the courts, it will be for the betterment of the entire country. And with that, I wish the fathers and the country all the very best.
Thank you for tuning in today. If you know of someone you feel should feature on our show, please contact us at brave@nmh.com.na.